Hi, everyone. We hope you are thoroughly enjoying the conference, and we have an amazing panel prepared for you with amazing speakers, and we are looking forward to it. So the panel will be 1.5 hours. The first hour or so will be just a discussion between us, and then you will have the chance to get your questions answered and discussed. So please, keep your questions coming, and then we'll have them asked to the panelists at the end. We are very, very excited to have all these amazing speakers. It is a great honor. Some are in Morocco, some are abroad. So we have the privilege to hear both perspectives, perspective of who are working in Morocco and abroad. So there are 3 directions that we're going to be discussing on this panel. The first one is about research. So research, R&D, types of research, and then we'll go and talk about the gap between research, maybe in an academia setting, and industry. And then we'll talk about innovation. And then last, we'll talk also about research and innovation in Morocco, and maybe how we can encourage collaborations and so forth. Maybe I will start by just talking about briefly MoroccoAI, because the community and bringing everyone together is at the heart of MoroccoAI. I mean, MoroccoAI is all started because professors in Morocco and abroad, they wanted to bring everyone together and collaborate on projects and study together and so forth. And these are the initiatives, like all of the events of MoroccoAI are just to bring the community together. And we hope that this conference would be a date where everyone gets together, hopefully next year, inshallah, in person, where we get to catch up with old colleagues and make new root connections that will give birth to collaborations and some amazing work. So without further ado, I know that some of the speakers, they were introduced by our moderators, but I have the privilege now to let them introduce themselves. So 𝐬𝐶 Kemal, 𝐶 Walid, 𝐶 Mehdi, Dr. Bensmail, maybe an intro about you personally and also the work that you do. And I'll start with you, Dr. Bensmail. And then you're mute, if you can unmute.
Yes. Thank you, Salim. Thank you, Walid, Mehdi, Kawtar. We have met virtually many times, and Kemal, Moujahid. It's a pleasure and honor to meet all of you. And this is really an amazing opportunity to get to know each other. So if I want to talk about myself quickly, I'm a principal scientist at Qatar Computer Research Institute and also full professor at Hamad bin Khalifa University here in Qatar. I went through different continents. So I left Morocco after getting a bachelor in mathematics to France, where I had my master in statistics and biostatistics, mathematics, and then started my PhD in the same domain and finished it at the University of Washington in Seattle. After that, I went through a postdoc process in Leiden, and after that came back to the US as a faculty member. So I had an opportunity to hold position of assistant associate professor in Virginia and Tennessee. At the end, I end up my trip or my journey here in Qatar since the Qatar Computer Research Institute was created. So I was one of the first people who they hired, and since then I have been here in Qatar for now 11 years old. So my domain of expertise is mathematics, statistical machine learning, artificial intelligence. Mainly, I applied that recently for the past 10 years in life science, what is called omic data. So briefly, this is what I'm doing.
Amazing, and it is a great honor to have you, Dr. Bensmail. Dr. El Meghraoui, maybe you can tell us about you and some of the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salim. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. So So I started, of course, my journey like maybe all of you in Morocco. So I'm born and raised in Morocco. So I did my bachelor's and master's at 𝐁𝐽𝐴 University. And then I spent a couple of years teaching at 𝐁𝐽𝐴 University computer science classes. And then I decided to come to the US to pursue my PhD. So I came to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and I spent about 5 years doing my PhD. And during that, I also did an internship, like a couple of internships with IBM Research, and I just fell in love with the research environment at IBM. So I decided to join. After, interviewing with many companies, I loved, to pursue industrial research. So I've been with IBM Research ever since, and I've worked on several projects, initially started, with looking at operating systems research. My background is at the intersections of systems, and right now, systems and artificial intelligence, mostly looking at, next generation accelerators for AI. So that's what my current research, but throughout my career at IBM Research, I've worked on several projects, looking at the, systems level, looking at innovations in the OS, the storage, distributed systems, and right now with the huge interest in AI, we're trying to build infrastructure to optimize machine learning and AI infrastructure. And so right now I'm affiliated with the IBM Research AI Hardware Center, where we're looking at next generation AI hardware accelerators and basically helping solve the compute problem of AI.
Amazing, amazing. It is a great honor to have you, Dr. Meghraoui. Walid, it is a pleasure to have you. Please tell us a bit about you and some of the work that you do at Ghissassi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Salim. So in my side, I was born and raised in France, and I arrived in Morocco in 2013. So in terms of academic background, I graduated from École Polytechnique, I think like Mehdi and Kemal in France. And then I started my career in the financial industry, actually, in London for 3 years. And with one of my best friends, who is Moroccan, I arrived in Morocco in 2013 to have a startup, actually, in education. So I ran this startup for 6 years, whose name was 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐝, and it was a business. But in this business, I taught mathematics to students from preparatory classes, and for 6 years. And then I sold my shares of this startup, and I discovered AI and machine learning. And actually, in the financial industry, in 2000 and 2010, we didn't call this machine learning, but we were doing a lot of modeling and quantitative statistics. It was just with a different name, actually. And so I rediscovered these disciplines, and I got into OCP in the beginning of 2019, where I manage a team of data scientists, software engineers, data engineers. And so my angle is really how to apply AI and analytics to a traditional company, to traditional companies in a more general way, for non-tech players, and how to collaborate with researchers. When does it make sense? And so, yeah, so I'm very happy to be here. And so, yeah, for people who are curious to know what we do at OCP using AI, so I guess OCP is an industrial company. So we extract phosphate and we produce fertilizers and we sell it. And so we're trying to apply data analytics in all of these different steps, basically.
Amazing, and it's a great pleasure to have you, Walid. Mehdi, hi again, and thank you for the great talk this morning. It was amazing. Would you please tell us a bit about you and the work that you do at DeepMind?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Dr. Salim, for the kind words. It's a pleasure to be here with old friends, Kemal and Walid, and new friends, you, Halima, and Dr. Kawtar. So, Mehdi, I run the product organization at Google DeepMind. We're a research lab that's part of Google and Alphabet. And our job is to build products that integrate DeepMind's research and then use that to improve Google products. like YouTube, search, Android, etc. And we do a lot of that thanks to Kemal's work, actually. Prior to joining DeepMind, I was at Google already. I spent the past 10 years actually at Google. I started in the enterprise organization, which now became the cloud org, and I spent time also in the emerging markets team, where we did a lot of initiatives in Africa and on improving fiber networks and Wi-Fi to increase the quality of connectivity in Africa. And I did projects in Tunisia, but not in Morocco, unfortunately. Prior to Google, like Walid, I started in banking, using stuff that people call AI, but was called differently back then. I also did strategy consulting, but a bit of private equity and telecoms. I graduated from engineering school, business school, and political science, and grew up in Morocco, where I spent the first few years of my life in Rabat. And thanks for having me. Really pleased to be part of this panel and contribute to the Moroccan AI community.
It's a great pleasure to have you, Mehdi. Kemal, thank you so much for the amazing talk. Please tell us about you and the work that you do at Google.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you all and to reconnect with friends. I think we met each other at UNP6 2 years ago when people were actually still traveling and meeting in person. And Mehdi, I don't think Mehdi, like we work in the same company, but I don't think we've seen each other in person. Although maybe like a year ago when you came to Mountain View.
We met, Kemal, 3 months ago.
That's right. That's right. We were at the tennis place. Exactly.
We went to your tennis club. Yeah. Actually, for the fun story, I grew up at, I think, 3 blocks from Kemal, but we waited many years to meet in the US.
That's right. So my name is Kemal Moujahid, and I'm a product lead on ML at Google. And then we'll also work on building the community that uses these tools. Before Google, I worked at Facebook. I built the Assistant M, and also built the Messenger platform for 1 billion people. Before that, I was an entrepreneur. I worked in EdTech and real-time collaboration. And so I think what I'm really seeing is how ML is changing everything right now, and we really need to make this accessible to everyone. I think that we have this incredible things that ML researchers, the best minds, and we have some of them here, are inventing these new things. And then on the other hand, you have developers who have the use case in front of them, and they don't know how to leverage machine learning, right? And so I think like that's why I personally love building platforms, because I think that's one of the most efficient ways to bridge the gap between those incredible minds and their invention and what actual developers can build with their skills. And so that's why I love working on TensorFlow and JAX, and I love seeing what Mehdi's team are doing with protein foldings, and we get to see how they're changing the world using our tools. So it's a really great job. Yeah, I'm really glad we're doing this event. I was born and raised in Morocco in Rabat, and so I'm super stoked to see the Moroccan community grow.
Amazing. It's a great pleasure, and it's an honor to have you all. And I just want to say that the community, the Morocco AI community, is a big mix between professors and even veterans in the AI space. And there is a big community of young researchers. And a lot of them, of course, aspire from your amazing careers. Briefly about me, I'm Dr. Salim Chemlal. Actually, I can relate to Dr. Meghraoui. So I started in Akhawain, and then I transferred to Virginia. My PhD was in machine learning in healthcare, and then I was a professor for a few years, and then I moved to Silicon Valley. I've been a data scientist at startups, at NVIDIA, and at ZS. Now I lead a few data science teams in pharma, both in R&D and commercial. So we'll get started. So some of the questions are targeted to our panelists. and then some questions are open questions, but please do not hesitate to follow up on any point if you would like to add, dear panelists. So I will start with Dr. Bensmail. You have a very long experience in research, academia, and industry. So we would love to hear from you first. What are the different types of research? How do you see research conducted differently? For instance, there is maybe theoretical research, and then you need applied. Maybe there's research that needs a lot of compute, and research that don't need a lot of compute. How would you classify the different types of research?
Okay, thank you, Salim. Thank you, everybody. Yes, being started, I started as in academia. Well, I'm still in academia, but it just recently I decided to go down to the earth because when you start with probably coming from a mathematical background, all you need to know or you need to do is just sit down there, solve equation, etc. But to tell you the truth, the motivation that pushed me when I was at the bachelor, la licence in Rabat, I was doing mathematics, but I decided at the last year to have a minor in statistics for the simple reason that in statistics I can see the application of mathematical modeling, a mathematical equation into real world. This took me through France and in the US to apply all this mathematical modeling into the business, because I was part of the College of Business Administration when I was in Tennessee. That was the first time, or the first intersection with reality, applying that into some domain of business. But when I moved to Virginia, I was linked to the medical school, Virginia Medical School, and this is where I was really, really attracted to something called applied science, because I can see, for example, from a simple regression equation or a simple classification equation, how can you apply that into predicting or predicting a disease? For example, at that time I started to discover what is called genome-wide association, GWAS. So GWAS is nothing but the collection of individual subjects from hospital or from healthcare company, collecting that, and for each subject you collect also the genotype of that person. The genotype is nothing but a binary variable 0 and 1, and then use a robust model, a regression model, to predict the disease, like having a diabetes or being healthy, just using this mathematical logistic regression to solve a problem in health. And this was the driving motor for me to keep working in that area. This took me into the genomic, to genetic, to proteomic, to metabolomic, and also this. Also, one thing that I can advise students and people who are getting into research, mathematics, I also share the same thing with my students. Don't forget to have the basic in mathematics, the basic of mathematics. Even if you are a computer scientist or if you are doing what is called data science, mathematics is the basic, because you cannot advance without knowing exactly the background. So you have to have some feet, and the feet on the ground is the mathematical equation, because anything that we do right now, we call it big data, we call it all this name that artificial intelligence, it's everything, it's based on some kind of mathematical modeling. So you cannot do that without the basic thing. So this is where I applied, this is where it took me to 15 years of application of successful what I call statistical machine learning, artificial intelligence, into producing some good paper in nucleic acid NR, nucleic acid research, Nature paper, bioinformatic paper, briefing in bioinformatics, and all of these are just nothing but solving or building from a model that is used for small data, because when you look at the statistics, I can stop me if I am talking too much, because I talk a lot. So, but this is some opportunity probably to share my experience with everybody, especially students. So, for example, when you just look at what we do when you are a statistician, so statistics, it was built on solving a problem on a small data. So you build your mathematical model, but you solve a problem when you collect data, 30 sample, 40, 50, 100. When it comes to big data, in any any research area, you have to start from those mathematical model to make it scalable and to make it robust. One of the examples that I can share with you is, for example, when you are using the linear regression model, it works on a simple data. But when you are building it on a big data in which your sample size n is small and your number of variables are million, like genetic data, the gene, we have like million of genotype, proteomic data, metabolic we have. So here we are faced with what is called an ill-posed problem. P is greater than N. So how can you apply any classification or logistic regression? So in this case, you have to adapt your model into this in this area. And this is how I I grow in my research area, to the point of coming to what Kemal said, to something that is of real problem solving, which is building a platform. So as an example, recently, I didn't give that because I didn't have time to discuss that today. But for example, recently, I just produced something called PRISC. So it's a simple idea, but it has been useful here in Qatar, and it is, I think, one of the first kind of platform or application that we can upload on a phone or a web server that can solve a lot of problems. So what is PRISC? PRISC is an application that can predict if a person not having a diabetes, that has been already solved. If a person has a pre-diabetes, because when you have a diabetes, it's done. You have to take medication, or you have to solve the problem like through other mechanisms. But pre-diabetes is reversible. So if you predict yourself as having pre-diabetes, you can go back through diet, through other things to solve the problem. So this application, what it is, simple. It's a robust logistic regression based on a Qatar Biobank data that I produced here. I helped producing what is called the risk score. So the risk score is just based on some variables that are very, very important to predict if a person will have a pre-diabetes or not. So it's like a risk score, either given your data, like you can, and I will take the 5 variables that I found very useful. For me, I can give you or the application on the phone or web server can give you in 1 second if you are having a low risk or high risk or medium risk of having pre-diabetes. So after producing this, it has been implemented here at the hospital, Hamad Hospital, and all these branches. So it means that once any person has if you have a headache or you have a toothache or something, you are going for something else, through that triage, when you go to a nurse, while they are taking collection of your data, like the weight, the height, age, etc., they can choose the 5 variables that I gave them and give you run a small Python algorithm in the application that give them the risk of pre-diabetes. Then they can, if you are having a high risk, then they will send you to the right doctor while you are coming probably from just a simple headache. So this is just to give you an idea about the process going from the theory into real life application and building up platforms.
Thank you so much. It's amazing how you kind of described it, starting from the theory exactly to being it implemented and used. To follow that, so Dr. Meghraoui, we see research is driven by different motives. So I would like to ask you, what is really the strong drive from your experience of research? Is it, I'm just going to maybe say, is it maybe publications and recognition? Or is it product innovation? Or is it just ideation and ideas? So what do you believe is on that?
So, so the work I do is more aligned, like in the industrial research settings. A lot of the work we do is focused on, doing ideations, doing research, to solve practical problems, critical investigations, aimed at, doing acquisition of new knowledge or skills to develop new products or services, and also bring, significant improvements in existing product, processes, or services. In academia, usually, the research is focused on research, basic research, and discovery focus, and lots of the research is done for the sake of learning, as opposed, to clinical applications or practical research applications. So, but at the same time, at IBM Research, we also have a kind of a balanced agenda where a lot of the research we do is focused on improving our products, helping the business, but also making impact. But there is also like kind of long, far-reaching research that looks at, vision for the next 10 years. How are we changing the world or the industry or technology? For example, when the research that we're doing in quantum computing, it's not probably practical, right immediately today, but it has, really far-reaching impact. We're looking, for example, research in areas of, the combination of reasoning for AI. How do we really get to general artificial intelligence? Right now, I mean, most of the AI applications is, in narrow AI, where you have a lot of data, you train these models, and then you're trying to solve very specific tasks like doing image classification or doing speech transcription or translation and so on. But then we're really also looking at, extending that beyond, combining reasoning, kind of mimicking really how our brains work. And that, research directions towards getting to this general AI. So it's, the drive, for research, of course, is to make impact. A lot of it is business impact, solve problems that's impacting, lives. But, it's a kind of a balanced agenda that we're trying to do, where you're trying to help, solve problems that we have today in terms of improving our products, improving the yield, reducing costs, solving, energy problems. But there are also, research that you have to continue to invest in that's, gonna have impact maybe 10 years from now.
That's great. It's very nice to hear how research is being done in academia versus how research is being done in industry. And we will definitely come back to that when we talk about the gap. Maybe what are some of the challenges of research in academia versus industry. I will go to Walid. Walid, you have a very diverse and unique experience that you have worked abroad Morocco and now in Morocco. So would you tell us how research is being done at Ghissassi, and how is it different than, let's say, the rest of Morocco?
Yeah, with pleasure. Thank you very much, Salim. So, as you probably know, OCP works closely with UM6P, which is the university that belongs to OCP, and also with other universities all over the world, actually with MIT or with EPFL. And actually several times I was in a situation where I had to frame research subjects for researchers in these different universities. And with the experience, I seem to have always the same challenge, because usually researchers like subjects which are correctly framed, and ideally you would love this subject to have an article about, and to be written about, and to have a publication with a high quality publication. But in general, business problems, or usually business problems, are not so, I mean, in some cases, business problems can become research subjects, but sometimes it's not the case at all. And usually innovations inside traditional companies that can bring a lot of value. When you look at this innovation, the algorithmic part, or the, let's say, the part that can be relevant for a research program is only a piece of this innovation. And usually it's inserted in the software. And usually you have to work a lot on the change management, and especially for companies which are really non-tech, like OCP, which is not a tech company. It's a commodity company, basically, which sells fertilizers. And so we managed a lot of research projects, which has been successful. But to find subjects which are both interesting for the company and for the researchers, it's a challenge. It's really complex, but it's really rewarding when it works. When you find a subject that can really interest researchers and can bring value to the company, I mean, it's the ideal situation. But in many times, this situation is hard to find, and you need to talk a lot with what researchers really do. And for me, the most complex part is what I call the problem framing. It's like a company has a problem, and how do you take this problem and you translate it into a research subject that can be relevant for researchers, because otherwise it's just a consulting, project, and it must be interesting for researchers. And this is where the challenge is. I mean, when you look at the problem, you can say, okay, this is just a consulting project. Doesn't make sense to give this subject to researchers. But in other situations, you realize once you dig a little bit, and you realize, okay, this thing it's really complex thing, and I prefer to take a couple of years and to give this subject, because usually it takes a longer time, obviously, and to leave this subject to researchers for them to dig it and to try to find something. So for me, that's the challenge. It's how to translate a business ambiguous problem into a concrete research subject that can be interesting for researchers.
Amazing. And to follow that up, so MOSIP is definitely leading the frontier in Morocco. So I'm going to go to Mehdi. You're working with amazing, brilliant scientists and researchers at DeepMind, and many breakthroughs are coming from DeepMind, AlphaFold, AlphaStar, and so forth. So what is it that DeepMind is doing different than everyone else, or do you think it's just because of the resources? So what is it different about the research in DeepMind?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Salim. I'm going to build on what has been said, especially what Walid said just recently, right? Like the framing the problem. So at DeepMind, we have these world-class researchers who are on their academic objectives, right? Like, so as Dr. Qatar was saying, it depends on why you're doing research. So some researchers are applied researchers, others are more academic, trying to like advance the state of the art in science. So we have more of trying to advance the state of the art in science towards AGI, right? And then there is the other part of the organization, so us, the applied team, and our job is to understand what's happening in research and then translate that into an application. And as Walid was saying, if you wanted to work with researchers closely, there are things that they're not really suited for, right? Like it's a waste of their time. So you have to frame the problem in a way that they can understand it. And so the way that we do it, right, is that we constantly scan what is happening in research and what are the needs of the product teams across Google. And then we do this, what we call like we run a dating service between researchers and product problems. And we then take these ideas through a pipeline of like match, incubate, launch, which basically the way that it works is that we'll see a very promising research idea and we'll see a group within Google that might benefit from that. And so we'll take them on a date, right? Like we'll take somebody from the applied research group, somebody from the partner team at Google, and we'll tell them, hey, we have this, you seem to have this problem. Is it interesting for you guys to do something together? So we start to do like few pilots, and then if things, which you can compare to like first dinner, and if things go well there, they like start to see each other a lot more. And then when we find that we have a match, as in this research solution is able to solve this product problem, then off they go, right? Like we put more resources behind it and we invest and take it there. So really what we have learned over time is that there is the consulting trap where people have problems and you have capabilities in data science, machine learning, however you want to call it, and you just like advise them on things. But the people are frustrated, like both ends are frustrated with that, because the researchers feel that they're wasting their time, it's not generalizable enough, it doesn't actually advance the state of the art of science. And the product teams also feel frustrated that somebody is just giving them some advice, but that it's not scalable. Like next time they have a problem, they need to go back to them. So we changed it to this other process where you work hand in hand with research and you let research follow its course until the researcher is happy and they have published something and they got the recognition that they're looking for and that they need for their work. And then you try to match it with the important product problem. So I think probably very similar to what Dr. Halima was sharing about, like the diabetes example, where you have an idea and then you match it with the problem. You don't just take a technology and go look for like using it all over the place. So that's what has actually helped us quite a lot at DeepMind.
Yeah, Mehdi, I'd like to add to that. You know, it's kind of also similar to what we do at IBM Research, and I'm sure it's pretty much, you know, everywhere, like also Microsoft Research and other, you know, industrial research. I think having this marriage between the conceptual and then theoretical research and then practical research is very important to provide this linkage where you let the researcher do deep dives and then spends time to get to maybe a NeurIPS publication or these high quality publication, because that really takes time. But then at the same time, you kind of try to build the seeds into the product and then have teams that kind of follow what's going on and then start also building prototypes. So at IBM Research, we have also this prototyping team. So a set of developers that we have that work very closely with the IBM researchers. So they can, you know, while the idea is kind of maturing up, you start getting good results, you start building prototypes and then injecting some of them into the product to see if these things are helping the product. So this way also you don't waste the researchers' times into all the operational issues, the development, the web interfaces, the integration challenges, because it takes a whole lot, you know, of development cycles, testing, integration, and so on, for things to really work and be like in production. While research is really focused on the algorithmic challenges and really advancing state of the art. So having that linkage and providing channels where researchers communicate with products and also having maybe prototyping teams in between that can help bridge these gaps, I think it's going to be very important. And also I think what's something that's very important is involving students early on, you know, whether it's undergrad, you know, research, or even, you know, at the high school level, to start kind of, you know, mentoring them along the ways, because I think that's very important to build next generation leaders. So it's having students, you know, doing internships or being part of this journey of creating fundamental research and translating it into product. I think it's very important to build those early in the pipelines, you know, from, you know, high school all the way to PhD level, to really invest in building next generation leaders and researchers and scientists.
Yeah, thanks a lot for jumping in there, Dr. Kawtar. I couldn't agree more with what you've said. A lot of it is into what I perhaps could add to what I said, is that this is done by cross-functional teams. So it's as you said, and as Walid was talking about, it's a lot of translation that happens from all the way from fundamental research to an actual application and putting it in production out there used by billions of people. It requires a lot of like very focused, a lot of functional specialists that are able to work together. And so for us, it goes from fundamental researchers, research engineers, software engineers, product managers, program managers, business development people, and regulatory people, etc. So it definitely takes a village and a ton of cross-functional folks to bring. Each one brings their own perspective, and it improves the whole solution at the end.
Super interesting, and thanks so much for that. This kind of matching, Mehdi, you mentioned this kind of matching between research and then the products problem, and it's very nice, because I was wondering why. So maybe Morocco, we don't have anything like this, but probably this is an opportunity out there for maybe. But I believe there are maybe challenges maybe to get there. So I'm gonna go now. We're gonna go. We heard very well about research, and then we're gonna come back to research. We would love to hear now from the industry perspective. So Mr. Kemal, he has, of course, been head in TensorFlow, so many collaborations with startups and different communities. So I would start by the question of, from all your interactions with all this, what is it for you that drives innovation?
Well, actually, so I think picking up from where the conversation was, you know, this matching between researchers and product teams who have an idea of an application, right? One thing that happens right after that is something gets productized. You know, like that works first, and then there's another team that thinks, hey, I have the same problem. Maybe this thing can help as well. And then at some point, some like infrastructure product gets built. And then usually this is the moment that I see this thing starting scaling. Another really interesting, to me, what really drove innovation in incredible ways is open sourcing, because, you know, that matching between, you know, like this team of researchers who has this idea and that product team, like you have like this sparse matching, if you will. But then when out of that collaboration comes out a paper and then a code and then a library that gets productized, now all the other researchers and all the other product teams can start looking at this idea and one, you know, use it, but then build on top of it. And I think that has unleashed incredible creativity in the field. Like for me, you know, I was a student before this all happened, and I sometimes wish that, you know, I could just move in time and do my studies now, because, you know, it's just incredible. You could just go and look at the actual code that the world-class researchers have used to crack these incredible problems. You can look at the code. You can see how it works. You can have access to the data set. You can get free computing resources from your Colab notebook. This is unprecedented. So I think like the world, the talent is equally distributed in the world. That's something that I strongly believe. There's incredible talent in Morocco, incredibly smart people. And I think that there's like this leveling playing field that now, you know, you could go online, you could look up the latest code, the educational material, you can hear about the interesting problems that people are trying to crack, you can go contribute. And all of that, in my opinion, is creating incredible innovation at a speed that we've never seen before, frankly, in the history of mankind. So I know it sounds a bit grandiose, but I really strongly believe that.
And sorry, Salim, thank you. I just wanted to add something to what Kemal just said, because I couldn't agree more with what he just said. But just talking about the Moroccan context and how we could help this innovation, you know, happen in Morocco, we also need to understand some economical concepts, because Mehdi and Kemal businesses are really software businesses, which means that, I mean, for example, at Google or at YouTube, if you improve slightly an algorithm, or if you improve slightly, for example, the recommendation system in YouTube, I mean, you directly improve the time that people spend on YouTube. And so you directly improve the valorization of YouTube. The road between innovation and business impact is quite short, because it's a software business. And so we just need to have in mind that most of Moroccan companies, actually, I guess all of Moroccan companies most of them are not really software companies. They're not they don't have a platform with billions of users. And so all these for Moroccan talents who are looking for, who are thinking, I mean, how can I help Moroccan businesses with my data science skills? They just need to realize that for traditional companies, it's another mindset. It's you need to understand the traditional business, the traditional value chain of the business, and in the value chain, how to identify data analytics use cases that sometimes can be solved with an Excel spreadsheet or with you know, it's not necessarily big data. I just want to emphasize that big data, ML, and AI are really the consequences of the software businesses. And so traditional businesses can also use them, but differently. And it doesn't mean that Moroccan talents can't be useful. They can be useful for Moroccan companies, but they also can be useful for software companies outside Morocco. And it's another subject, but in my mind, I mean, that's true with especially with my previous experience at 𝐁𝐬𝐞𝐬𝐿, where I've been working closely with Moroccan students in math and physics. I can definitely see that here you have a lot of scientific talents, scientific, capabilities in math and physics. And we all know so many Moroccan students in all the most prestigious universities. And I think that these talents can also be useful, not only for Moroccan traditional companies, but eventually for software companies outside Morocco. But I mean, it's hard to connect people and everything, but there's something I think that can be done in this area. But I just wanted to emphasize the difference between traditional companies and software companies, which are, I think, different.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and you're right that digital natives, they sort of have this construct that they have all their data, and improving their models directly affects their bottom line, and that's completely 100%. I think what I see as really interesting trend, and maybe we'll get to that, is also edge and mobile devices based applications, which sort of is not in the same contract of huge database trying to get an insight and improve your business. More around, let's have this physical object do something interesting in the world. Can be translating something, could be like a little robot in the field in agriculture. I shared this amazing story of like the Great Barrier Reef, where basically you have this starfish that's eating the coral and it's destroying the Great Barrier Reef, and we have to locate the starfish. And right now, the way that it's being done is you have divers who are behind boats and they're counting the starfish, which you can imagine, like you could have a robot with a camera and computer vision model to do that, right? And again, getting back to the power of platforms, there is a developer who might have this idea like, well, I would like to build a model that does that, but they're not an ML researcher. And if you can make it really easy for them to create a starfish counting model in a robot, then now you have incredible real life impact. And I'm sure that there are plenty of use cases in the field that again, like once people understand what ML can do, and it's not that difficult, and the tools are getting easier and easier, they can have an impact in real world, in the real life.
Yeah, and if I may add, Dr. Salim, I think those are all great points, and especially in Morocco, with this traditional setting of these companies that are not necessarily software, there are lots of great opportunities to apply AI, like across things like agriculture, finance, banking. And I think identifying where to apply AI itself is a challenge. What are the processes that can be automated? Taking a traditional workflow or a process, where do I inject AI to do the right thing?
Exactly.
That is itself a research problem. We have a research team that just looks at business automation. How do you identify, these bottlenecks in the current process flows? Where do you inject AI? Where, you can get the big bang of the buck, where you get most of the benefits or most of the, ROI. So that is also, a good problem in itself. And I think lots of opportunities, especially in Morocco, where we need to focus on improving the infrastructure and improving businesses like small businesses. But I think also the companies need also to have the mindset of, let me open my doors to maybe researchers or students, others that can come and help me build or inject AI into my business. So maybe there's something that governments can help, initiate or bring that linkage between, data scientists and traditional companies, and identify opportunities where we can help, leapfrog businesses by introducing AI and data science.
Yeah, definitely. Just to add the last thing, sorry, Salim, because this is true actually what Kemal and Kawtar just said. I agree with this, and actually I really see a lot of use cases in the industrial operations. So I don't know if because I read that DeepMind did a lot of things in the industrial operations using trying to cool the servers for Google Cloud, I think, or something like this. And actually, for me, this is what I observed, but it's just that the business case is different. You have a lot of small use cases where you can improve the industrial operations, because actually now with data and algorithms, I see that it's really easy to do simulations. So actually, if you want to do a digital twin of your industrial operations with your historical data and with algorithms, you can much more easily than before, than 10 years ago, for example, understand what's going on in your industrial site and trying to see which are the problems and what could be done to improve the overall system. And so I don't know if Mehdi had the opportunity to work on this, on how DeepMind helps Google manage its servers for the cloud. But in my modest experience, I see a lot of, I think there are going to be a lot of innovations in this field in the next coming years.
Walid, since you mentioned that you missed the talk this morning, I spoke about this and shared exactly the example.
Nice.
I totally agree, actually, with everything you said. Like, no, not all industries are created equal. There are different digitization levels. But if you take someone, you mentioned like the idea of digital twins. If you take somebody like Amazon, right? Like, it's you can think of them as a software business. They also deliver books to your house, and they use machine learning all over the place, right? Like, to improve their internal operations. And so even industrial legacy companies can reap the benefits of these technologies if they do the investments that Dr. Kawtar, for example, mentioned before. Like, if you're able to, as you said, like have the sensors to gather data, if you can then augment maybe that data set with synthetic data, etc., and have the in-house capabilities to do that, then you can also be part of the change that these technologies can bring to your legacy business model.
I want to follow that up. You know, like how Kemal said that we can easily see innovation and creativity coming from big companies. So, and to the other point, that talent is equally distributed all over. But if we reflect in innovation, so if we reflect, for example, Morocco, we can't say that there is too much innovation coming from Morocco. So is it bad because most of innovation is coming from all these big companies and they're already in other countries? So how can we maybe drive more innovation from Morocco?
Yeah, let me jump in there maybe, and others can add their views and thoughts. So I think one thing that I remember is that R&D spend is really low in Morocco, right? Like, unfortunately, and innovation comes from research, right? Like, and so you have to invest in research. You need the talent to be given the opportunity to do research, which is a high risk, long-term activity that doesn't necessarily pay back the ROIs that Dr. Kawtar was brought up very, very quickly, right? Like, these are very, very long-term investments. You take Google and the self-driving cars. This is like incredible investment, right? Like, where if you think about it, the day that you decide to put like billions into changing the way that people drive all over the world, you're guaranteed that it's not going to happen in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or maybe even a decade, right? But still, some companies and some countries invest massively in research. We're talking about AI. They're like, most huge big countries, leading countries have AI strategies and plans, right? Like, China have their like 2050 plan that's centered on AI. The US has an AI plan. Canada has an AI plan. France has an AI plan. The UK has an AI plan. The UAE, close to Qatar, has an AI minister of AI. And so innovation, right, like, comes from just putting resources and people and building these platforms and ecosystems that Kemal mentioned. And so it comes down to a lot of incentives, right? Like, if people used to say, if you show me the incentives, I'll show you the results. Like, incentives drive performance in some ways. And so for the specific context of Morocco, depending on how, as Walid was like hinted at, right? Like, there is internal and there is stuff that happens locally, but that is used externally. Like, shifting the views and investing massively in R&D is actually incredibly important, because that is how that is where long-term growth comes from. Like, I'm not an economist by any means, but I remember that like growth comes from population growth and growth of like productivity growth. So you get growth because you have young population that like keeps growing, but then at some point it comes down to productivity growth, right? Like, and that comes from innovation, and innovation is usually driven by research. And if you if we use the example of like the COVID vaccines, right? Like this came from mRNA vaccines, which is an incredible research breakthrough that took years and years to get us there. There was like the genomics revolution and the ability to just understand DNA and then understand what RNA is, and then be able to send it to a specific cell and get our bodies to produce these things. So this took like years and years of government funding and huge incentives to private companies, and also private companies who did massive investments in this field to get there. So yeah, others probably have other views and can add to this, but it really comes down to the ecosystems that you build, and within these ecosystems, like the incentives that you provide people to be able to just innovate. Innovation is not just breakthrough things that happen in developed countries. Like you see innovations in all countries, as Kemal was saying, right? Like the talent is equally distributed. So mobile payments started in Kenya out of all places, didn't start in the US or Japan or France, etc. So yeah, I'm really curious to hear what others have to say on this topic.
If I want to add, oh, okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dr.
Okay, no problem. So just because before I forget about, I have too many things to say, but to catch up on what Mehdi and everybody said, there is something called incubation. So for example, we cannot do anything in isolation with the scientific technology park. For example, here in Qatar, what I liked recently, having all this university, because what is Qatar Foundation? Just to give you a quick overview, it's a small city which has 7 branches of American universities. So Cornell, Texas A&M, Carnegie Mellon, George Washington, etc. So 7 universities plus Hamad bin Khalifa University. They are all working. So each college or university is focused on something, from computer science to health to etc. But within this circle, there is something called Qatar Scientific Technology Park. So this Qatar Scientific Technology Park, it's a hub that is meant to bring your research into applied field. And what, as Mehdi said, what they have added to that, a big budget, a bunch of a lot of money that are there that is shared with the researcher to encourage them to have some kind of startup. So yeah, I am a researcher, I'm working on some nice idea in isolation, etc. And then it seems that my algorithm is working very well to solve some problem. So I will just send, apply for a disclosure innovation. And if it is accepted, then I will be invited to give a presentation and then have some kind of some money to have a startup company. It seems that this idea has been extremely working very well recently, and we have seen a lot of startup companies here or in the US or in Canada with money coming from Qatar. A second thing also that I can catch up on Mehdi and also Kemal is when I was working 2-3 years ago on protein crystallization, we published some nice paper, we produced some web server, we were happy that we get some nice deep learning algorithm that predicted us some kind of crystallization of 0.98. We were happy. Suddenly, when we want to continue on that, on the solubility, on anything that has to do with the protein, we heard about DeepMind solving the problem of 3D structure. And I was thinking, okay, I should stop here. Probably I should switch gear, because I know that DeepMind, it doesn't have one person and 2 PhD students and 1 software engineering. It's a whole group of people that are working intensively, so I cannot compete with them. So this is a second thing that probably can help in when it comes to Moroccan scientists, etc. We need some kind of, a group through startup, through private company and we need some kind of group of software engineering, to create innovation, you need to have researcher, scientist, you need to have student, as we said, you need to have software engineering. And this is something that also we started to do at Qatar Scientific, at QCRI, Qatar Computer Research Institute. We started as just a national institute with several groups. Each group is focused on language, technology like Arabic translation, etc. Another group on social computing, another group on distributed system, my group on data analysis and health, etc. And then we, after 5 years, we said, okay, we just saw paper published, etc., which is nice from someone coming from academia. Then the idea is that was popped up is, okay, we should create a group of software engineering, and then those group of software engineering will be working toward projects. Like if there is some idea that come up with from a research group that is worth to continue and to see it in life, then we will assign a group of software engineers to work with those scientists to create some kind of application, platform, etc. And this has been successful recently because there were a lot of creation, like of traffic application for traffic things, something related to sport because of the World 2022 World Cup, health in my area, language, and this is probably the number one, some algorithm that can translate automatically when someone is speaking in different language. It can do translation from Arabic to English, English to Arabic. So we'll not compete with Google in that situation, but they are doing something like including, for example, Darija, Moroccan Darija. They are now thinking about Berber, using also Khaliji language, etc. So those are probably something that are not, initiated still in Google. So there are some ideas, but those are just few things that I want to highlight before I forget to catch up with what we are discussing right now.
I'm sorry, Salim. I just want to add the last thing because I'm living in Morocco. Actually, I think I'm the only one from this group. And actually, it's also that there is a small detail. It takes time. Actually, I don't know if you're aware of it, but I guess I don't know if you thought of inviting 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐝𝐻, for example, because to be honest, it's been now 2 years that I work at OCP. OCP is not because it's the company that I work for, but seriously, they invest a lot of money at UM6P. You have a lot of laboratories at UM6P that work on AI. You have 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐝𝐻, you have Rashid Gharaoui with the School of Computer Science. And I think, honestly, that OCP is trying to build what Dr. Halima Bensmail, that what Qatar has built through what you call the Qatar Scientific and Computational Center of Research or something like this. But honestly, and it takes time, actually. But around me, I see a lot of efforts in this direction, not only around AI, but around technological innovation. And there is a lot of investment. A lot of people are trying to work on these subjects. And every day I receive emails telling me, Walid, how can we contribute with OCP, trying to build a research project that can add value to OCP. And so I work inside OCP, but I see a lot of the ecosystem in a more general way. And it takes time, but a lot of things are going on. And from abroad, it's hard to see these things, but they exist. And the last thing I wanted to add is that at the end of the day, the change is made by people. So if you guys have any idea, you can also contact people in Morocco and contribute. But at the end of the day, it takes time, and of course, it's less mature than some other ecosystems for obvious reasons. But things are changing. I don't know exactly what will happen in 10 years from now, but I just have to testify that I see around me a lot of efforts in this direction, and yeah, it has to be underlined.
I think that's great, to hear, Mr. Walid. But one thing, maybe I would like to add, if Dr. Salim, if you can allow me. One of the big problems I see, I think, in Morocco is the educational system. Our universities. I think the case of maybe OCP and Al Akhawain and few universities that have resources, they're doing great. But if you look at the majority of our universities, like public universities and so on, there is really a huge gap there. especially in research or getting access, to resources, just simply, funding students to go participate in conferences. So there are, issues, in the infrastructure of the university system, increasing the pipeline of talent, but also fundamentally, retaining talent also in Morocco. Otherwise, I wouldn't be, here in the US. I would love to stay in my country and then do fundamental research in the advanced state of the art, but it's really hard to do it in Morocco because, of lack of resources and things like that. But at the same time, also having Moroccans, working worldwide, especially now with all the digitalization and so on, we can bring a lot of innovations and ideas and then create collaborations. So I think the pipeline, increasing that pipeline of talent in Morocco, starting really at early stages, in the, primary level to high school, to university level. How do we inject, we have in Morocco, I think, great educational system, especially in math, I feel. The math we did, in Morocco, I feel is much stronger than the math that my kids are studying here in high school or in middle school and so on. But I think when it comes to things like leadership, communication, language, other things that are also important to be successful, we are lacking in some of these aspects. But also in having those incentives that Mehdi talks about doing research, encouraging students to participate in competitions and then go out there and publish and go to conferences and really be part of the innovative ecosystem. That takes a lot of incentives and investment, and also getting access to computational resources. Where am I going to train these things? Sometimes you need big clusters, you need infrastructure. So there's a lot of issues, I think. Hopefully, if groups get together, like government with educational institutions, people who are the policy makers in Morocco, to really look at how do we help solve these gaps, and also how do we bring talent, Moroccan talent, outside to help. I'll be happy to mentor students or provide internships and things like that. I'm sure all of you can do things like this. I think this conference is one step towards that direction. But there's a lot to be done, to increase that pipeline of talent and translate that into actual products and innovations that really change lives in our country and the world.
Can I add one little thing? I don't want to dominate the discussion, but this is really interesting. Just one little thing. I can probably add, not contradict Kawtar, but I want to be optimistic, Kawtar, because I had one thing that also is helping now Moroccan students to open up to the world is through the globalization of the internet, etc. Because I had this experience with the students. What we do, for example, every year we do a summer internship. So we have projects, we call for, we put them online, and we are looking for good students to spend like 3 months, etc. So specifically in the past years, we have students coming into QCRI to work with us for 3 months and then leave. But because of the COVID, I was surprised and happily surprised that I had application from students from Morocco who applied, and I cannot tell you that their performance in computing, in using open source, as Kemal said, in producing web server, website, etc. It was really, really amazing. So I think the fact that there is this globalization of the education through access to internet, access to GitHub, to open source algorithm, etc., I think is helping a lot in that situation. Unlike when we were in, when we were in Morocco, we have only the library. We have to go to the library. We have to open the book and start, even programming from scratch using the Fortran, etc. But I think now things has changing. It just we have to encourage that through, for example, international collaboration. Here at QCRI, for example, we did have that a lot of, what is called the students, etc. So what we did at the beginning, just to jumpstart the institute, is through international collaboration with MIT, with CSAIL, and with other institutes through some kind of common proposal. And this is how, until things idea was created and the engine started going on. So this is just to, and I'll stop a little bit dominating the discussion.
Kemal, did you want to add anything? I see you're muted. I was coming to you anyway because I really wanted to hear from you. Like, what would you say to all these universities in Morocco, because we have these low resources, either from compute power and all?
Right. So I think that if you look at the new capital now is really intellectual human capital, right? That is the new thing that can create sort of new innovation, new value. And that's where most of the countries are really investing heavily, just to make sure that they have like talent and people who can invent things. Now, obviously, you know, to Mehdi and Walid's point, like, you need an economic loop, right, to pay for these humans to actually be able to, you know, to grow, and you need to pay for researchers in universities. But I'd say the silver lining that I see, again, if I contrast the situation with like 10 years ago, is that now if you're like a young student and you have the energy and you have the talent and you have an internet connection, there's just so much you can do. Like, you can, you know, I mentioned the program that we have at Google with free TPUs. Will give you access to the same computing chips that like DeepMind researchers are using, right? And then you can look up, you know, you can look up their educational material. You can look up the code that they've used. So you can really sort of create and learn and start contributing to, obviously, to the local you know, economy, but also to the world's economy. We have students who reach out to the TensorFlow team because they want to contribute on GitHub. They want to translate the docs, right? So it's something as simple as that. Looking at the documentation and translating in Arabic, you can start doing that, right? So again, it's not, I'm not like, there are a lot of different things that need to happen, but I see this as a wonderful, wonderful transformation. That now, you know, if you're young and you have the energy, and obviously you know, you have the internet connection and you could sustain your life, then you could go and access all these things. And I think that's pretty wonderful.
You know, that's amazing. And I love it how everyone from the community is super hopeful and optimistic about the future. So to follow that up, so would you recommend, or would you say, for example, for Morocco, there is a specific, would you recommend a specific direction of research, either maybe on a specific discipline, or maybe a type of problem to search, maybe that we can get the most innovation from there? Or is it just in any type of research is open? Well, what are your thoughts there?
So if I may eventually begin, and I will let my friends. I think what I observe around me, because I am often contacted by Moroccan students and Moroccan PhDs to tell me, yeah, can we help? Or, I mean, what could be my field of research, and with your experience at OCP or in any other place? But I think for me, it's just, and the only advice I can give, because I don't know exactly, of course, I don't know where the future is heading, but I think that sometimes technical people, and especially scientific people, sometimes lack of business mindset. And I would say understanding that to do something valuable, you need to have in front of you someone that is willing to pay for a problem to be solved. I mean, it's something really fundamental that usually when you're young and when you spend a lot of time in theoretical fields, you don't realize this basic stuff. And so that of course you need to love what you do, but you need to understand that at the end of the day, if someone is willing to give you a job or willing to sponsor you for anything, it's because it should be inserted in an economical system. And so they want to pay you because you're supposed to contribute for the solving of a specific problem. And that's something really important that people need to showcase when they either when they apply for a job, or when they when they're looking for someone to sponsor their PhD thesis. And it's something that usually when I talk to young people, and especially young scientific students, and I can see that there is sometimes, and sometimes the lack of there is a lack of this skill, in my humble experience.
I can add something to what Walid said. Probably to choose a direction on which we want to, progress on developing AI and machine learning is to capture what we have. So, for example, through UCP, so we did a lot of things on agriculture and the fertilizer, as you said. So we need to work on that area, because that's one of the thing that is successful in Morocco, and to advance it to our to be on our positive side. We have also, since we are building, Morocco is trying to advance in the building of port of Tangi, of Dakhla, and so forth. So we can work on the supply chain, logistic, transportation. So there are a lot of things that we can do there using machine learning, artificial intelligence to advance it in that. So if there is something coming from overseas, it shouldn't take everything has to be digitalized and processed accordingly, so that there will be no delay. We can also, since we are good also and known in tourism, we have a lot of things to do in that direction. So we have to focus on what we have as a richness in the country, and start with there to advance it using machine learning. And there are a lot of things to do in that direction. Health also, when it comes to health, yes, we are a little bit behind when it comes to electronic health record, for example. So we know that we have a big hospital at Rabat, Ben Sina, Avisan. And now we know that there are a lot of other hospitals that are coming along. So it will be good to be at the front of those projects and try to have everything maybe digitalized. So if someone is coming to a hospital, it's good to have a data on a database already there, like a Cerner, where we have data as an image, as a scanner, as things, so that it will be useful for research scientists at university to analyze. I had worked with the colleague, for example, from Morocco, from University of Fez, on diabetes, and it was a little bit painful at that time. I mean, a few years ago, because he had to send me the data, and we have to do some kind of analysis, etc. And just transferring the data was not that easy, because it's there is some privacy that comes with that, etc., etc. So that's one thing. And on a happy, probably not happy ending, but happy. I want to mention something that is nice. So there is recently this year. Like every year or every 2 years, what Qatar does, they launch some kind of collaboration with Qatar and a specific country. So, for example, a few years ago, there was some kind of intensive collaboration between Qatar and Turkey through some kind of. So there is a lot of money that are put there to to create some innovation and some product. And this past year, there was some kind of launching of a joint project between Qatar Foundation and Morocco, specifically with working on trying to create a database for the first time in the Arab country, database of the Arabian horses. So I was very happy to see Moroccan or to get to know Moroccan scientists from the other side, from Morocco, from Rabat and other university, who are involved into this. And I can tell you that I had the access. I had the pleasure to meet with even PhD students who are at the university who will be working on that project. It will take 4 years. There's a lot of money there, and with this project, one of the discussions that has been mentioned there is to buy sequencer at the university for people who are working at the university in Rabat, for the people who are working as a veterinary things, to buy some kind of special camera. Because of the horses, they need to study, for example, some specific disease, so they have to have something. So this is some nice to start with, and something to focus on it. So as a summary, we build from what we have, and then we can spread. So we should not spread at the beginning. We should not go horizontal at the beginning, but go a little bit vertical, and then we can spread once we build some capacity there.
Yeah, building on what Prof. Halima just said, I totally agree on about that. I think so. I wouldn't tell researchers what to do, right? that's why Professor Halima, I let the researchers speak first, and Dr. Kawtar, is super curious for what you will say. So one thing, there's this saying in French, right? Like that, there's researchers that are searching, we can find them. Researchers that find stuff, we're still searching for them. And so I think you should let researchers explore stuff, but give them the environment to do that, right? And I think the idea that Prof. Halima shared of having a software engineering group that deals with like all the tooling and helps researchers just focus on what they do best, which is research and not software engineering, is an incredible asset. So we have that at Google and at DeepMind, and it like changes the lives of researchers. That's why they can focus on what they do best, right? Then if you look at the context in Morocco and in any other place, right, like when the other countries looked at their AI plan, they started with what they have and the advantages that they have, and then they are trying to like keep them. And so for us, it's all of those things that Prof. Halima shared, right? Like healthcare, there's like a population that's growing, getting older, that will have massive needs in terms of health that the system will not be able to cope with. And so digitizing the system, using AI to help doctors and simplify diagnostics, treatments, etc., is super important. Agriculture is a huge industry. A ton of people are moving from rural areas to cities, and so you will need to use like these techniques to increase yields and keep supplying all of that comes from agriculture. Tourism, super interesting use case, right? Like you can, with all tourists that come, they speak various languages. You can helping with translation is incredibly important, and there you have conversational AI type tools. You can also help actually these tourists experience Morocco before they even come and attract new ones with technologies like AR, VR, etc. We can keep listing these, right? Like logistics, it's such an interesting use case. Education, I think Dr. Kawtar mentioned that it's really the building block for so many things, and that's what helps people build careers and lives, etc. So using some of the AI techniques to help students catch up and keep on improving and learning is super important. And then last, there is the you can keep on listing things that we have in Morocco and that can be augmented by these techniques. And then you can also think about where you need to be next, right? Like, because the world is massively changing, there are advances in so many fields, and countries are trying to position themselves in those, right? Like if we had this success with bringing automotive manufacturing in the country because of like our low cost advantage, but if people are replaced by robots, then we lose that low cost advantage, right? So we have to invest in things that will protect us in the future. So life sciences, we have incredible people in the field, and you give them the environment to do all of that research. So there are a lot of areas where we would benefit from investing a bit, and these include perhaps like crazy stuff like space, robotics, industry, life sciences, etc. And I think Dr. Kawtar wants to say something.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mehdi. I think those are all incredible ideas. What you and what Dr. also Halima mentioned, lots of use cases. But like you mentioned, we're lacking an AI plan. What is the AI plan for Morocco? So do we have the right infrastructure? Like we need kind of a data infrastructure and the computational infrastructure. If we want to do these use cases, sometimes you need huge amounts of data that you need to collect to be able to have meaningful models that solve the problem, that do the right predictions, the right classification, right? And training these models sometimes it takes huge computational resources that only big companies like Google, IBM, Microsoft, and so on have access to. So coming back kind of to the basics, investing kind of in an open ecosystem for data, like an open data platform, where students can have data that they can start to play with and wrangle with this data and then try to apply, algorithms and so on to solve them. So where do we get the data? How do we collect that data? And if all companies, like maybe agricultural companies and so on, start also contributing to this kind of, we can call it a national resource where everybody can kind of pitch in. Of course, it has to be data that can be shared openly, but at least some use cases or some sample data that can be shared with researchers, university students, and so on, so they can have actual things to work with. Like the data challenge that is also part of the conference is a great way, you know, to do these things, competitions and so on. So, but I think investing in the right platform, whether it's software engineering resources that can help with all the operational software development life cycles, or, you know, a data platform where somebody can inject data, gets data in an open platform, you know, in addition to all the tools that, you know, like the TensorFlow, the PyTorch, the, you know, lots of great open source toolkits out there that, you know, students, you know, researchers and so on can use. But I think we're lacking, you know, a good AI plan that hopefully government with universities and so on can all collaborate to do. And I'm hoping, you know, with the new government that we have, I think the minister that opened the conference, you know, she's a well, you know, established, you know, scientist also, you know, in the area of AI. I'm hoping, you know, we see great initiatives coming to help solve some of these issues.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Meghraoui. So for the sake of time, we would all love to hear final words from you on maybe insights and advice, maybe how to foster collaborations, maybe how a student or an entity can thrive in Morocco and abroad. From all the panelists.
Yeah, so I was going to just say real quickly, maybe I can make this my final thoughts, that I think it's really hard to predict what is going to work and what is going to be the application of AI that's going to work in Morocco, or like what is going to be the right research. But what we can do, though, is create the right environment for this to have maximum likelihood of happening, right? And so to Dr. Kawtar's point, like infrastructure investment, you know, it is a time today that you, with an internet connection, and if you don't have another problem to deal with in life, you can go and create a great sort of experience for yourself and be a contributor and find the right business application that will thrive in Morocco. But you need that thing to start with. So making sure that people have access to these tools, that they can carve out time to, you know, grow their brain and become active contributors, and then they'll go and find out the right things that is going to work out for their ecosystem, the right research. So I think investing in those infrastructure, that's why I love working on platforms and open source and providing access to free compute and creating those certification programs and those educational programs, because I feel that that's a great way to contribute to create like other minds that will go and do these amazing things for the world.
Amazing. Dr. Bensmail, maybe last words.
I'm here to help. So you have my email, and I went through a lot of difficulty to be where we are. I came from simple family. No, at that time there is no, you know, huge advance like now. So perseverance, and I'm here to help. So for example, just to give you an idea quickly, so when I am contacted by, or when I smell that there is someone who from Morocco who is there, I jump on the person and I just guide the person as much as I can. Quickly on the thing that Kawtar said and Kemal, I think there is the hope of having this data center in south of Morocco, right, in Laayoune, I think. That's something very good, because a lot of people here in Qatar, when they heard about it, they said, "Wow, you have a data center! This is the first in Africa." I said, "Yeah, we can have a data center also." So this is very good, and collection of the data. Yeah, you cannot do anything without having data from Morocco, because if we talk about data that they are available, like there are 𝐁𝐫𝐤𝐴X data, there are NIH data everywhere, like open database. But when we are solving a problem that's related to Morocco, we have to start from data that is collected in Morocco. But just to summarize, I'm here. Anyone who need any help, I'll be happy to provide that.
Very well. Walid, any last words on how to foster collaborations between universities, Morocco, and industry?
Yes, with pleasure. So yeah, as Halima just said, I'm also, of course, here to help. So if any student or PhD wants any kind of advice on how they could contribute to the Moroccan ecosystem, they can contact me directly. And in a more general way, I would really advise them to keep being optimistic, and that at the end of the day, I mean, any change is made by the people working on this specific field. So yeah, keep working and don't hesitate to contact me.
Dr. Meghraoui, any last words, please?
Yeah, just want to echo what everybody is saying. Also, I'm very eager to help. And there are lots of opportunities that IBM and IBM Research provides in terms of university collaborations and partnerships. If anyone is interested, let me know. I'll be happy to share my email, in the chat, in the stage, and then we can discuss that. Definitely, in terms of mentoring, in terms of support, in terms of also access to infrastructure, like Dr. Kemal said. I'll be very happy to get involved in, what would be the platform or the data center for Morocco. How do we build that? How do we get, the right infrastructure set up for Morocco? I would love, to be part of a project like that. And I'm sure others, would like to join efforts. NVIDIA has great, GPUs and so on. So if we can get Morocco, to partner with big companies like NVIDIA, IBM, and so on, you can definitely build, the next generation data center of the future. So with, where we can host data and do challenges and solve real problems for Morocco, I would love to see that in reality. I'm happy, to lend any hand I can do.
I love it. Thank you so much. Mehdi, any last words?
Yeah, of course. As folks mentioned, I think across Google, DeepMind, Alphabet, there are tons of programs that people can benefit from. If you're a student, there are internships. If you're a researcher, there are also internships, full-time positions, visiting researcher positions. And then for those who are interested in more of the application side of things, there's like Google for Startups and a ton of programs like that. Google Cloud offers compute to startups, to research institutions, etc. So, and then Kemal's team builds all these cool platforms that people can use all over the world to learn and develop their skills with that. So, yeah, feel free to reach out, explore, and check out what you can what you can use that is actually out there and free for you. And then, as we were discussing, I think you asked about what the country should do. So planning, right, like it's incredibly important for this, and not just short-term planning, but planning for the next 50 years is probably key. Learning from others and collaborating with the best is probably the second thing to do to inform what to do. And then be open-minded and humble, because there'll be a lot of failures on the road to figuring out what to do there. And I think initiatives like this one is actually an amazing opportunity for people to just get educated about like this trend that is actually just starting. And so, yeah, just encouraging you to keep doing what you guys are doing and bring more of these ideas and talks to people back home.
Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to be with you in this panel, and we're getting so many compliments and thanks from the community, and we hope to see you in person, maybe on our next conference.
Can I ask a favor, Dr. Salim? Can you send me a picture of this thing so I can do some publicity for us in LinkedIn, Twitter, because this is the era of social media. So that will be something nice to share with everybody.
Very well. I just took a screenshot.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And I wish
it's a pleasure. Thank you.
And I wish to the rest of the attendees an amazing rest of the conference. I would like to remind that in half an hour, about actually 23 minutes, we have Professor 𝐁𝐫𝐢𝐝 giving his honorary speech, and we are all looking forward to that. And again, to the panelists, thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to connect with all of you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.